The clinking of forks was the only rhythm left in the room. The roast glistened under the chandelier, and the smell of pine from the wreath mixed with something buttery and sharp. It was Christmas night, and the kind of silence that sat between family members wasn't peaceful. My dad sat at the head of the table like he'd reclaimed a throne. His voice carried low and sure the way it always did when he felt in charge. Across from him, Chloe smiled too easily too much, brushing her blonde hair behind her ear as if the world adored her. Vivian's laugh came next, light and expensive. She always smelled like gardenia and good intentions. I tried to focus on my plate, moving peas into little lines, pretending to listen while my mind slipped elsewhere. My phone buzzed against the linen napkin. For a moment, I thought it was one of the work messages I'd been ignoring all week. Something about year-end reporting. I glanced down and my breath caught when I saw the name. Dad. The screen flashed a voice memo symbol. I tapped it without thinking. Static, then his voice. Not tonight, Chloe. Just make sure she doesn't see the paperwork until after we sign. 10 seconds. That was all. The air left my chest in one long thread. I locked the phone, placed it face down beside the knife, and smiled like nothing had happened. Dad looked up. You all right, Em? I nodded, took a sip of water. The glass trembled just enough for me to notice. Chloe reached for the gravy boat, her gold bracelet catching the light. My phone was still warm in my hand under the napkin. My heart didn't pound. It slowed cold and steady. After dinner, Vivian insisted on coffee in the living room. She talked about the lake house, how quiet it would be in winter, how Dad should consider simplifying the estate while he still felt sharp. I sat in the corner of the couch, the firelight flickering against the ornaments. My phone stayed silent, now heavy in my pocket. I studied their faces the way I used to study contracts at work. Vivian smiled when she spoke, but her eyes darted toward Chloe whenever Dad hesitated. Chloe nodded at the right moments, encouraging him like a teacher guiding a child. I saw the pattern as if someone had drawn it in pen. Dad asked if I'd brought dessert. I handed him the peppermint pie I'd baked that morning. He said it was too perfect to cut. Vivian laughed again, that same light laugh. My fingers itched to reach for the phone to replay the memo, to confront them all right there between the garland and the good china. But confrontation had never built anything lasting. Proof did. Quiet things did. I smiled, thanked her for the compliment, and made a note in my head, December 25th, 8:16 in the evening. Later, when I slipped my coat on, Chloe hugged me tighter than usual. You've got to relax, she said near my ear. It's Christmas. Her perfume was sharp citrus and something synthetic. I held her shoulders gently and said, You're right. She smiled like she'd already won something. Dad waved from the doorway, tired and proud. I walked out into the snow with the sound of their laughter following me. The drive home felt longer than usual. Streetlights turned the road into ribbons of white and amber. My hands were steady on the wheel. I replayed the 10 seconds once more through the car speakers. Just make sure she doesn't see the paperwork until after we sign. The words hit differently in the dark. I saved the memo twice, uploaded it to a private cloud, and turned off notifications. At the next stoplight, I wrote a single line in my notes app. Dad voice memo. File name 1225 dinner. Then I added a second line, no confrontation. Documentation only. When I reached my apartment, I left my boots by the door and sat at the kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I opened my laptop, created a folder named Family Documents, and copied the file in 3 locations. The last upload finished just after 9:30. I checked the metadata, made sure the timestamp matched the original. My reflection in the screen looked calm, maybe even detached. I whispered, All right, let's start the audit. I pulled an old notebook from the drawer, the kind with ruled pages and a broken spine. I wrote down what had happened in order: dinner, memo tone, key phrase time, witnesses present. Then I added a question mark beside paperwork. My mind started organizing without emotion. Chloe's pattern had always been speed. She rushed decisions, filled silence with certainty. Dad trusted movement. He equated it with progress. Vivian provided polish, the smile, to make it all look natural. Together, they formed a kind of machinery that didn't stop unless someone unplugged it. I checked my phone again, no new messages. I opened the shared family calendar out of habit. Nothing for tomorrow. Then, as if on cue, the screen blinked. New event added, document signing. Tuesday, 9 a.m. My stomach tightened. The event had been created by Chloe. I set the phone down and rubbed my temples. The old Emma might have called right then, demanded an explanation, cried or shouted, but not this time. I'd spent years teaching compliance officers how to document misconduct without alerting the subjects. The same rules applied here: keep records, maintain neutrality, avoid escalation. I wrote another line in the notebook. Confirm counsel availability Monday morning. The snow outside thickened, tapping softly against the window. I thought about Dad at the head of the table, carving the roast with the knife he'd bought after Mom passed. He looked smaller now, surrounded by people who spoke for him. I remembered the way he used to handle decisions back then, slow and methodical, reading every word before signing. Maybe age had stolen patience, or maybe loneliness had. The kettle whistled. I poured a cup of chamomile tea, added honey, and let the warmth settle in my chest. For a moment, sadness crept in, quiet but persistent. Not anger, just the ache of realizing how families shift shape when trust becomes currency. I looked around my small apartment, the stack of compliance reports on the counter, the faded photo of me and Dad fishing on Twin Lakes, both of us grinning in the sunlight. I whispered to the empty room, "I'll protect you even from them." The next hour blurred into small motions, scanning old estate emails, searching my inbox for anything labeled beneficiary, checking voicemail transcripts. Nothing alarming yet. But that memo had cracked something open, and now the air felt charged with secrets. I opened a new note titled Step 1 Establish Trail. Under it, I listed Save Memo Record Date Log Participants, Verify Document Type, Identify Motive. My handwriting stayed precise, deliberate. Near midnight, the apartment dimmed except for the blue light of my screen. I reviewed my notes once more, then backed up everything on an external drive. I thought of how Chloe would describe this if she knew. She'd call it paranoia. But paranoia was just vigilance misnamed by those who had something to hide. Before going to bed, I scrolled through old family photos on my phone. Last Christmas, Dad had given both of us identical bracelets. Chloe's was engraved with family first. Mine said, "Trust yourself." I hadn't thought much of it then, but now it felt like a message I'd missed until too late. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. The city outside was quiet, blanketed in snow, streetlights glowing like watchful eyes. Somewhere between exhaustion and resolve, I promised myself that from now on every word, every call, every paper would be recorded and secured. No confrontations, no warnings. Just proof collected one careful moment at a time. The last thing I remember before sleep was the faint buzz of another calendar notification. I didn't check it. I already knew what it was. Another plan in motion, one I'd soon learn how to rewrite on my own terms. The morning light came in cold and blue through the blinds. It was the first Monday after Christmas, the city still half asleep under the snow, and I had already made coffee before the clock hit 7. My kitchen table looked like a war room. Laptop open, notebook, ready charger, plugged-in phone, face up beside it. I had slept maybe 4 hours, my mind replaying that voice memo again and again until it became background. Noise no longer a shock, just information. The steam from the mug curled against my face, and I said out loud, Step 1, record everything. My own voice sounded different in the quiet. By 7:30, I had the file copied to a second drive. At 8, I renamed it with the timestamp and saved it to a folder hidden inside my tax documents. Then I wrote in my notebook, Backup 1 external drive, Backup 2 encrypted folder, Backup 3 cloud archive. I checked each one until I saw the green check marks. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tapping of the radiator. The world was still slow, but my mind wasn't. At 8:15, I opened a new email to my dad's attorney, Alan Morris. He had handled our family's estate planning since before Mom passed. I typed slowly, keeping my language neutral. I hope you're well and had a restful holiday. I would like to review the most recent draft of Dad's documents this week to make sure everything is current. No urgency, just routine compliance. Best Emma Reed. I read it twice to ensure there was no emotional scent, no sign that I knew anything. Then I sent it. Next, I opened the contact list from my bank. Janet Price, branch manager. Reliable, careful. The kind of woman who had spent 30 years watching people try to slip through loopholes. I composed another message. Hi Janet, hope you're staying warm this week. Could you confirm if any changes have been initiated on the Reed family? Accounts recently. I phrased it like a security check, nothing more. Sent at 8:43. My phone buzzed once. Chloe. The text read, Reset week coffee. Later I stared at the words, trying to decipher whether it was peace offering or distraction. My fingers hovered, then I typed back, busy morning, maybe later in the week. A beat passed before she sent a heart emoji. I didn't answer. The city outside was waking up, cars scraping ice from windshields, dogs barking in the alley. I put on a sweater, tied my hair back, and started a fresh page in the notebook. Title timeline. I listed every event since the dinner. December 25th, 8:16 p.m. dinner. Voice memo from Dad, duration 10 seconds, phrase includes paperwork and Chloe. December 26th, saved and verified. December 29th, calendar invite, document signing. Tuesday 9 a.m. Every entry got a small check mark once verified. It felt mechanical comforting. At 9:15, Alan replied, "Good morning, Emma, glad you reached out. Let's schedule a review before any signing occurs. I can reserve time at 11 tomorrow if that works." His tone was professional direct. Relief moved through me like warm air. I replied within a minute, 11 works perfectly, thank you. I'll bring Dad's current folder for reference. For the next hour, I cleaned. The apartment wasn't messy, but the act of putting things in order helped me think. Dishes, laundry, the small tasks that felt like reclaiming control. When I finished, I sat down again and opened a new document labeled Questions. I wrote 1. What is the purpose of the new signing? 2. Who initiated the update? 3. Are witnesses required? 4. Does Chloe have power of attorney? The list grew to 10 questions before I stopped. At 10:30, my phone lit up again. Dad calling. I hesitated, then answered. "Morning," he said, his voice carrying that cheerful strain he used when trying to sound normal. "Hey, Dad, how are you feeling?" Good. Just wanted to remind you tomorrow morning we're meeting with Alan. I wanted you there to keep it all straight. Vivian and Chloe will come too." "That's great," I said. "I'll bring my notes to help keep everything organized." "Perfect," he said. "Your sister says I should simplify things. You know how complicated all that paperwork gets." He chuckled and I smiled even though he couldn't see it. "Sure, Dad. We'll make sure it's simple and accurate." After we hung up, I exhaled slowly. The confirmation came from his own voice. The meeting was happening. I added the call to my log. Then I opened my encrypted drive again and checked the memo's timestamp. Still intact. By noon, I had drafted an internal checklist in my work email. It looked like something I would send to a compliance team review process. Controls, identify potential conflicts, record evidence chain. The phrasing steadied me. I poured another cup of coffee and sat near the window, watching flakes drift sideways in the wind. My phone buzzed again around 1. Janet from the bank. She left a voicemail, her voice calm and clipped. "Hi, Emma, thanks for reaching out. We haven't processed any formal changes, but there was an inquiry flagged on the system last week. Category beneficiary update. It was never finalized. I'll keep an eye on it for you. Let me know if you need documentation." I saved the message, then wrote down her exact words. Category beneficiary update not finalized. By mid-afternoon, I had everything backed up and labeled. I created a small spreadsheet date event participants action taken. It looked professional enough to pass as work material if anyone ever asked. Organization was armor. Each entry was a step away from chaos. At 3, my phone rang again. Chloe this time. Her voice was bright, almost playful. "Hey, I'm just checking in." "You're quiet today." I smiled into the air. "Just busy," I said. "Year-end stuff." She laughed softly. "You never stop working. Anyway, Dad's happy you're coming tomorrow. He said you always make him feel safe signing things." Her choice of words hit like a pin against glass. "Safe signing things," I said. "That's what I'm there for, right?" She hummed agreement, then changed subjects, talking about her new winter coat, the sale she found downtown. I let her fill the silence. When the call ended, I sat back and replayed her tone in my head. There was a confidence there, maybe even relief. She thought the plan was intact. I let her think that. The light shifted to amber by 4:30. I made soup for dinner, something simple, and sat by the window while it simmered. The apartment felt smaller now, as if the walls had moved closer. I took out my notebook again and added one more entry, confirm meeting details. Bring Dad's folder. Keep all communication neutral. Underneath, I wrote in smaller letters, observe body language, no confrontation. At 6, I received another email from Alan's assistant confirming the appointment. Conference room 3:11 o'clock sharp. Witnesses optional, notary on standby. The words notary on standby made my chest tighten slightly. It meant signatures were expected, not just review. I copied the email into my backup folder and printed a hard copy. The rest of the evening passed in slow rhythm. I cleaned the kitchen again, watered the plants, set out the outfit I'd wear to the meeting. Navy sweater, gray slacks, small pearl earrings. Professional, forgettable. I wanted to blend into the background, to be the quiet observer who noticed everything. Before bed, I checked the family calendar once more. The event title had changed slightly. It now read Signing Review, same time, same place. Modified by Chloe at 6:52 p.m. I smiled without meaning to. She was trying to make it sound procedural, harmless. Good. Let her think it was routine. I shut off the lights, but sleep didn't come easily. The hum of the radiator became a clock in my mind marking minutes. I thought about Dad's voice on the phone, the way he sounded when he said simplify. He wasn't malicious, just trusting. That trust had built our family once, and now it was being weaponized against him. The thought ached more than anger ever could. Somewhere between midnight and 1, I opened my eyes to the faint glow of the street lamp. The city was quiet again, snow whispering against the glass. I whispered into the dark, "Tomorrow I play along. I'll smile, I'll nod, I'll take notes, and when it's done, I'll have proof for every word." The clock ticked softly in response. I closed my eyes, letting the plan settle into place like freshly fallen snow, undisturbed and silent. The scent of lemon polish hung in the air when I stepped into Alan's office. The table stretched long and narrow beneath the fluorescent lights, and a neat row of pens waited beside a stack of folders. The carpet muffled every step. Chloe was already seated crossing her legs and tapping her phone, her expression smooth as glass. Vivian sat next to her in a cream coat, adjusting her scarf with practiced grace. Dad stood near the window, squinting against the glare of winter light, one hand in his pocket. When he saw me, he smiled, tired but proud. "Glad you made it, Em," he said. "Of course," I replied, setting my bag down and keeping my tone light. "I came to help make sure everything's accurate." Alan entered a moment later, his glasses glinting. He greeted everyone warmly, then looked at me with a small nod that said he understood more than he let on. "We'll make this simple," he said, pulling a file closer. "Robert, you mentioned you'd like to review some updates before signing." Vivian leaned forward slightly. "Yes, we just want to make sure everything's in order before the new year." Chloe smiled, her voice like honey. "Dad gets overwhelmed with paperwork, so we thought we'd help organize." I stayed quiet, opening my notebook and uncapping a pen. Alan began reading from the file, his tone neutral. "These are the standard provisions from the last revision," he said. He flipped a page, the paper whispering under his fingers. I watched Vivian's hand twitch toward her purse, where a folded document edge peeked out. Chloe leaned back, legs crossed, one foot swinging slightly. The rhythm of her movement matched the quiet thud of my heartbeat. When Alan paused to explain a clause, I spoke carefully. "Can we confirm that this review remains non-binding until all parties have verified terms?" Alan nodded. "That's correct, Emma. Nothing will be executed today without full acknowledgement and witness. Notation." I smiled. "Perfect. Just wanted clarity for the minutes." Vivian's gaze flicked toward me, polite but cold. "Minutes," she said softly. "I didn't know this was formal. It helps keep everything clear," I answered. Dad looked from one to another, his brow furrowed. "Is this going to take long? I don't want to sign my life away twice." Chloe laughed lightly, touching his arm. "It's nothing complicated, Dad. Just signatures where they belong." Alan adjusted his glasses again. "Let's slow down a bit. I'd like to review capacity and understanding before any execution. Standard procedure." I watched as Alan slid a document forward. A faint scent of ink rose from the paper. It wasn't part of his file. The header looked different, bolder. My eyes caught the title before Vivian could shift it away. "Transfer on death beneficiary designation." I let my expression stay neutral. Alan noticed it too, his hand stilling. He glanced at me, then at the document. "This isn't part of our review packet," he said quietly. Vivian smiled, a touch of pink on her cheeks. "Oh, that must have gotten mixed in by mistake." Chloe leaned forward, quick and confident. "It's just for reference, Alan. Nothing to sign today." Alan didn't move the paper. He turned it so the heading faced him, scanned the first few lines, and slipped it under his folder. "We'll address that later," he said. I could feel Vivian's posture tighten beside Chloe, a silent ripple of irritation. I made a small note in my notebook, pre-filled form, witness present logged. Then I looked up at Dad and asked how he'd been feeling since the holidays. "Tired," he said, "but fine. Too much sugar, probably." Everyone laughed politely, and the tension broke for a moment. Alan resumed the review, reading aloud the clauses for property distribution, health proxies, and trust allocations. His tone stayed steady. I took quiet notes on every question he asked and every phrase Chloe interrupted to simplify. She always liked to finish other people's sentences. I noticed Dad nodding along, not really reading the pages anymore. His eyes were glassy, the way they got when he tried to focus too long. When the review paused for coffee, I stood near the window with Alan. The snow outside fell in slow spirals, the street below muted. He kept his voice low. "That form," he said, "wasn't in our originals." I nodded. "I know. I caught it when Vivian opened her bag." He sighed softly. "We'll handle it by the book. I'll keep it logged under today's record, no action taken. I'll have the witness photograph the visible portion, timestamp it, and seal it to the file." "Thank you," I said. He gave me a look that said he'd seen family like this before. Chloe called from this table. "Ready when you are." The coffee cups clinked as Vivian stirred hers with too much force. We returned to our seats. Alan asked each person to initial the attendance record, nothing binding, just acknowledgement of presence. I signed carefully, then passed the pen to Dad. His hand trembled slightly as he wrote his name. Vivian smiled, reaching to steady his wrist. I watched her fingers press too long, her thumb resting near his pulse. Alan gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. For transparency, I'll include the attendance sheet and the visible document reference in today's summary, he said. Vivian's eyes narrowed for half a second before her expression smoothed again. That's fine, she said. The more detail, the better. The witness, a quiet paralegal named Denise, entered with her phone camera ready. She took a single photo of the folded document before sealing it in a transparent envelope. The flash reflected off the polished table, leaving a sharp after-image in my eyes. Chloe tapped her pen impatiently. Are we done? Alan nodded. For today, yes? I'll finalize minutes and circulate a review copy by end of day tomorrow. No signatures until confirmation. Dad stood stretching his shoulders. Well, that wasn't so bad, he said. Vivian looped her arm through his. See, nothing to worry about. Chloe gathered her things, glancing at me once, a flicker of something unreadable passing through her eyes. I smiled politely. See you tomorrow, Chloe. Drive safe. When they left the office, quieted, the smell of coffee and lemon polish hung heavier now. Alan sat back down, rubbing his temples. Families, he muttered half to himself. I waited a moment before speaking. Can I get a copy of today's summary and the photograph for my records? He nodded. I'll email both tonight. You handled that well, Emma. Most people would have made a scene. I looked at the sealed envelope on the table. I've learned that scenes don't prove anything. Paper does. Outside, the cold bit hard against my face. The snow had stopped, leaving a thin layer of light across the sidewalk. I walked to my car, slowly feeling the weight of what had just shifted. That form, that single folded paper, was proof that this wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. At home, I hung my coat, kicked off my boots, and set the laptop on the counter. The email from Alan arrived within minutes, efficient as always. Attached were 2 files, minutes of meeting 12:30 and photo evidence A. I opened the photo first. The image showed the upper corner of the form, the words transfer on death clear enough to read, the timestamp 11:46 a.m. My reflection appeared faintly in the gloss of the table pen poised mid-note. I saved the photo, renamed it, and logged it in my notebook. Under the entry, I wrote form intercepted, logged by witness, preserved. No reaction from participants beyond mild discomfort. Proceed to review minutes once received. Then I closed the book and exhaled. The apartment was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. I looked around at the ordinary things. The dish rack, the half-burned candle, the framed photo of me and Dad by the lake. I whispered softly. You still trust the wrong people, but I'm learning how to protect you. The quiet absorbed the words, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator. When I finally sat down on the couch, exhaustion pressed in. My hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline drained. Still, there was a calm beneath it, the kind that comes from knowing the ground beneath you is real, that you've caught something solid. Tomorrow, I'd review the minutes, check for edits, make sure every phrase stayed exactly as spoken. The proof had begun to take shape, piece by quiet piece. The last thing I did before turning out the light was plug in my phone. The screen lit up with a new notification from the family calendar. Event added brunch tomorrow, the Pines Cafe hosted by Chloe. I smiled faintly. The next move was already on her board. The cafe smelled like butter and maple syrup, the kind of sweetness that usually meant comfort. But today it tasted sharp. Chloe waved when I walked in, her hand raised just high enough for people to notice. Vivian sat beside her, elegant as always, in a beige coat and pearls, her coffee untouched. Dad was there too, stirring sugar into his mug with slow, careful motions. His eyes looked tired, like the light behind them was dimming. I took the seat across from him, setting my phone face down. Chloe smiled. Perfect timing, she said. We already ordered pancakes for everyone. Her voice was bright, rehearsed, a shade too cheerful. I smiled back, removing my gloves one finger at a time. Pancakes sounded fine. Vivian's perfume drifted across the table, sweet and expensive. The sunlight through the window made her ring sparkle when she lifted her cup. She said she wanted to talk about some next steps. Her tone casual, but her words too prepared. I listened without interrupting as she explained how keeping the estate tidy would save everyone stress later on. Chloe nodded along, adding little phrases like simple process and no big deal. Dad chewed slowly, eyes on his plate, saying almost nothing. When the food arrived, I cut the pancakes carefully, focusing on the rhythm of the fork against the plate. It gave me something to hold on to while Vivian spoke about transfer on death forms and streamlined ownership. I could feel Chloe watching me for a reaction. She thrived on small tells, on the flicker of discomfort that gave her an edge. I kept my voice calm. I said, that's smart to think ahead, but I'd like to make sure we follow standard procedures. Every form should be blank when Dad signs with witnesses and a CPA present. Vivian blinked a soft pause that didn't last long. Of course, she said, smiling again. Just basic paperwork. Dad looked up, then his fork halfway to his mouth. You two are making it sound like a board meeting. I reached over and touched his wrist gently. We just want everything to be accurate, Dad. You always said measure twice, cut once. He laughed a small, genuine sound. That's right, I did say that. Chloe leaned in, her voice dipping lower. We're not rushing anything, Em. It's just better to do these things while everyone's on the same page. I nodded, but inside I could feel the words sliding into place, forming the shape of pressure disguised as reason. Vivian opened her purse, pulling out her tablet. She swiped and turned the screen toward me. I saw an email chain open, the subject line reading, Updated TOD template. She said the bank had sent it for convenience. I looked closer, noting the sender's address. It wasn't the main branch. It was a regional service contact, one I knew handled only preliminary drafts, never verified documents. I smiled politely and said, let's forward those to the CPA for review before using them. The IRS has strict audit requirements for asset transfers now. It would protect everyone. Vivian hesitated. Chloe's smile faltered for half a second. Then Chloe said, sure, I can forward them. Her fingers moved fast on her phone. I took a sip of my coffee, pretending not to watch. The snow outside had turned to light rain, sliding down the windows in crooked lines. The hum of the cafe made everything sound softer than it was. Dad talked about the lake house, how the roof leaked last fall and how he wanted to repair it in spring. Vivian said maybe it was time to let it go. Chloe agreed too quickly. I asked if Dad wanted to keep it for summer visits. He looked unsure. Maybe, he said. Depends on what's easiest. I smiled, steady. We'll make sure whatever you decide stays exactly what you want. After brunch, we lingered near the counter waiting for the check. Chloe scrolled through her phone again. She laughed once, short and quiet, then said she had to stop by the bank later in the week. Vivian said she might join her. Dad didn't catch it, already talking to the waitress about how good the coffee was. I caught Chloe's reflection in the glass door as she tucked her phone away. She looked satisfied. I filed the detail away silently. When we stepped outside, the wind cut through the air, cold enough to make my eyes water. Chloe hugged Dad and said she'd call him later about Friday's plan. Vivian smiled at me, a smile that never reached her eyes. We'll loop you in when it's finalized, she said. I nodded, returning the same polite smile. Of course. I'm happy to review the details once you have them. The drive home felt quiet, almost peaceful on the surface. But underneath, my thoughts clicked into motion. At a stoplight, I opened my notes app and typed brunch meeting. The Pines Cafe. TOD forms mentioned, draft versions visible. Vivian's tablet, non-standard sender. Chloe confirmed forwarding. Dad unaware of timeline. I time-stamped it and added a small check mark. Back at my apartment, the smell of coffee lingered in my coat. I hung it by the door and sat at my desk opening my laptop. My inbox had 2 new messages. The first was from the CPA Laura Green, confirming receipt of my earlier inquiry. The second was an automated calendar alert, bank appointments added, Friday 9 a.m. and 10:15 a.m. shared family calendar. My pulse steadied, not faster, just clearer. I clicked open the details. Both appointments were tagged under Vivian's name, but Chloe was the one listed as the creator. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening a new draft to Laura. Hi Laura, forwarding the following for verification. I attached the forwarded emails from Vivian's tablet, the ones Chloe had sent after brunch. Underneath, I wrote, please confirm whether these templates align with standard estate compliance or if additional witness verification is required, sent at 3:22 p.m. Then I picked up my notebook again and wrote, Step 2, expose rush pattern. Observe calendar modifications, time gaps between events, frequency of simplification language. I drew a small arrow next to the line, a reminder to connect motive and timeline later. The rest of the afternoon blurred into quiet movement. I made tea, folded laundry, and waited. Around 5, Laura replied. Her email was short and sharp. Those forms are preliminary. They should never be used for signing without notarized witnesses. The sending address belongs to a drafts-only service line. Recommend halting until verified. I stared at the screen, feeling something settle inside me. Proof. I forwarded her response to myself, adding the words archive copy at the top. Then I took a photo of the screen and printed a backup. I placed it in a new folder labeled Brunch Records. Every sound in the apartment felt like part of a new rhythm, each one marking progress. At 6:30, Chloe called. Her tone was breezy. Just making sure you made it home safe. That was fun today, right? I smiled into the silence. It was productive. She laughed softly. Oh, come on. It wasn't a meeting, we were just catching up. I said, sure. By the way, I forwarded those forms to Laura. She'll make sure everything's handled correctly. There was a pause on the other end. Then she said, oh, okay. I didn't think that was necessary, but whatever makes you comfortable. Her voice tightened just slightly. I'll talk to you later, Em. She hung up before I could answer. I sat there for a while, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The city lights blinked in the distance, soft and indifferent. The pattern was forming exactly as I'd expected, speed, charm, deflection. Every move framed as efficiency. But the faster they moved, the clearer the trail became. Before bed, I opened the family calendar one last time. The appointments were still there untouched. I scrolled through the history log. Created by Chloe, modified by Vivian, viewed by Dad. No entry from me. Perfect. I added the screenshot to my archive and closed the laptop. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark for a moment, letting the quiet sink in. Somewhere between the hum of the heater and the faint traffic outside, I felt something shift. The balance was beginning to tilt slowly, silently in my favor. The bank was quieter than I expected, the kind of stillness that made every sound seem deliberate. The pens on chains clinked softly against the counter, and the polished floor reflected the fluorescent light like glass. I arrived 5 minutes early, coat button tight folder tucked under my arm. Janet Price stood near her office doorway, holding a clipboard and smiling the way only someone who had seen everything could smile. Emma, right on time, she said. I nodded and thanked her for fitting me in. She led me toward her office, the click of her heels steady and precise. Through the glass walls, I could see Chloe sitting with a teller at another desk. Vivian stood behind her arms folded, expression patient but alert. They hadn't seen me yet. Chloe's phone was in her hand, screen tilted just enough for me to catch the flicker of a shared document. I recognized the color of the folder from the brunch. Vivian's lips moved as if she were rehearsing something. Janet closed the office door behind us. Her desk was clean except for a stack of forms and a small vase of wilting flowers. She motioned for me to sit. So what can I help you with today? She asked, voice calm, but carrying the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to prove herself. I kept my tone light. Just wanted to check on some account notes, make sure nothing unexpected is moving. She nodded, typing quickly on her keyboard. The faint hum of the printer filled the silence for a moment. After a few seconds, she turned the monitor slightly toward me. No formal changes have been processed. There was, however, a system log entry from last week. Beneficiary inquiry. It was tagged as incomplete. I leaned closer. Who initiated it? She scrolled down, her eyes narrowing slightly. It lists a joint request from Robert Reed, verified by Chloe Reed. Then she looked at me, her brow lifting slightly. But there's no signature or in-person confirmation from Robert. That would have triggered a hold. I kept my expression neutral, nodding as if it were just information. Thank you, Janet. Can you add a note to the record that Robert confirmed he wants no changes? Until further notice, she nodded without hesitation. I'll note that the client expressed his intent to maintain current designations. Do you want that in writing? I smiled faintly. Yes, please, if that's standard. She smiled back. Standard when things get complicated. Through the glass, I saw Chloe glance toward Janet's office. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second before she looked away. Vivian leaned closer to her, whispering something that made Chloe's shoulders stiffen. I turned back to Janet. I appreciate your help, I said. She reached for a pen and began writing a short note on bank letterhead. The paper crackled slightly as she pressed down with practiced precision. The door opened before she finished. Chloe stepped in, her voice bright and familiar. Oh, there you are. I didn't know you were here too. Vivian followed, her smile too wide. We were just finishing up some things with Dad's account. Janet looked between us, her expression unreadable. She didn't stand up, didn't close the folder in front of her. That small act alone felt like a quiet shield. Chloe spoke again, her tone dipping into practiced charm. We wanted to update a few details, just minor things. Dad said it was fine. Janet folded her hands, the pen resting between her fingers. For changes of that nature, I'll need the account holder present. Chloe blinked. Of course, but he's home resting. We just wanted to prepare the forms. Vivian added quickly. He trusts us to handle the paperwork. Janet smiled politely, but her words were firm. The bank's policy requires direct verification from the client, especially for beneficiary updates. Any perceived pressure triggers a cooling-off period of 72 hours. She emphasized the phrase cooling off with quiet emphasis. Chloe's smile faltered. Oh, I didn't realize it was that strict. Janet nodded once. It protects everyone involved. Vivian shifted her weight, her tone softening. Surely there's a way to get things ready in advance. Janet looked at her for a long moment, then turned the monitor slightly so both of them could see. There's a pending note on this account. It states that no changes are to be made until further review. Chloe glanced at me, her face composed, but her eyes sharp. I smiled back gently. I guess that keeps things simple, doesn't it? Vivian gave a small laugh, the kind people give when they know they're cornered but won't admit it. Of course, we wouldn't want to complicate anything. Janet closed the folder, neatly slid it into her desk drawer, and locked it. I'll make sure this record is fully updated, she said. Thank you, I said softly. Chloe turned to me, her tone just shy of sweet. You didn't have to come all the way here. I shrugged, adjusting the strap of my purse. Just routine. You know me always double-checking things. She smiled thinly. Right. Routine. We walked out together, Vivian's heels clicking sharply against the tile. The air near the exit felt colder. Chloe stopped before the door, her voice low. You're making this harder than it has to be, Em. I met her eyes. Harder for who? She didn't answer. Vivian touched her arm lightly. Let's go, sweetheart. They left without looking back. I stood there for a moment, watching the reflection of the parking lot in the glass. Then I turned back toward Janet's office. She was still at her desk, typing a note. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. I added your request to the file, Emma, and I noted that the client appeared pressured by third parties. That phrase goes directly to compliance review. I nodded. That's perfect. She leaned slightly forward. I've seen this sort of situation before. Paper trails tell the truth better than words ever do. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the dry sound of branches against metal. I got into my car and sat for a while, letting the warmth from the heater build slowly. I opened my notebook and wrote Friday 9 a.m. bank meeting. Third-party pressure noted. Cooling off policy activated. Deed and toady attempts blocked. Witness Janet Price. System log pending. As I wrote, my phone buzzed with a new message. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. The text read, check the safe deposit logs. Then it disappeared, the thread vanishing as if deleted from the sender's side. My breath caught. I looked at the timestamp, 9:47 a.m. I copied it into my notes immediately. For the rest of the morning, I couldn't shake the image of that sealed folder in Janet's drawer, safe for now, but surrounded by invisible threads pulling from every direction. By noon, I drove to a nearby coffee shop, sat by the window, and connected to the bank's online portal. There it was, under the restricted access section, a notation about the vault. 2 entries from the past week, both unverified. One labeled family access, one blank. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. The quiet hum of the espresso machine filled the air, steady and grounding. I took a slow sip of coffee, then opened a new document labeled Vault Inquiry. Under it I typed anonymous tip. Check badge logs. Request legal preservation. Verify non-customer access. By the time I returned home, the winter light had begun to fade. I hung my coat, turned on the small lamp by the window, and opened my laptop again. I reviewed every entry in my notes from the dinner to now. The lines were beginning to form a clear path, not just of what they were trying to take, but how. Speed, charm, assumption, pressure. It was a familiar pattern, one I had seen in boardrooms and audits and now in my own family. I closed the notebook and stared out at the falling snow. Somewhere in the silence between flakes, I made a quiet promise. The next step wouldn't be reaction. It would be containment. If they wanted the vault, they would find it already sealed behind rules they didn't understand. The light dimmed to a pale gray, and I let the quiet settle around me. The day had given me more than I expected, proof protection, and a new question waiting in the dark. Who had sent that message about the vault, and what else did they know? I asked for preservation, not secrets. That was the phrase I repeated to myself as I walked into Alan's office. The next morning, the air sharp with winter and the faint scent of old books. He was already at his desk, sleeves rolled up, coffee half gone. When I told him about the anonymous text, his expression didn't change much, but his eyes sharpened. Vault activity without authorization, he said quietly, is a red flag. We'll handle this the right way. I nodded, handing him a printed screenshot of the bank log. 2 entries, one tagged family, one blank, both within the last week. He studied it for a long moment before picking up the phone. He called the bank's legal department directly, introducing himself as counsel for Robert Reed's estate planning review. His tone was professional, steady, the kind that made people listen. He requested an immediate preservation of non-customer access logs related to the vault, specifying the date range and badge entries. He spoke of compliance, chain of custody, and potential fiduciary exposure, phrases that carried quiet weight. When he hung up, he said, that sets a legal hold. They can't delete or alter anything now. I sat back, the tension in my shoulders easing slightly. How long will that hold last? He smiled faintly. Indefinite unless challenged, but I'll follow up with a written confirmation. He began drafting the letter on firm letterhead, the sound of the keyboard quick and decisive. I watched the snow drift outside the window, soft against the gray sky. The city seemed frozen in its own silence, like it knew something delicate was being decided. An hour later, the letter was printed, signed, and scanned. He handed me a copy. Preservation notice sent to the bank's compliance division. You'll receive acknowledgement within the day. I thanked him, slipping the paper into my folder. Before I left, he said something that caught me off guard. You're handling this with more control than most people I've seen. Most would go straight for confrontation. I smiled faintly. Proof lasts longer than anger. Back in my car, the heater hummed softly. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. It was from the bank's legal team. Subject line: acknowledgement of preservation request. I opened it immediately. The message confirmed the legal hold number 2749 and listed the documents under preservation badge access records, vault entry logs, and internal communications related to Schedule A. I read it twice, then saved it to 3 separate drives before texting Alan a short confirmation, received and verified. The rest of the morning passed in fragments. I stopped for coffee, then sat in my car outside the cafe parking lot, reading through old estate summaries on my tablet. The word Schedule A appeared again and again, tied to asset listings, property titles, and account designations. I pulled up the most recent version from last year. The lake house was listed under shared marital assets, not trust property. That meant any revision could shift ownership quietly if no one paid attention. By early afternoon, a new email arrived. The subject read, Schedule A revised, and the sender was Vivian. My chest tightened as I opened it. The attached PDF showed a short list, lake property, 2 joint accounts, and a handwritten note in the corner that read, updated for simplicity. The metadata showed it had been created at 11:04 p.m. last night by Chloe's user login. I stared at the timestamp, the blue glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes. For a moment, I just sat there listening to the low hum of the car engine. Then I forwarded the email to Alan with a short message. For your record schedule. A revision appears post-preservation, initiated by Chloe. He replied within minutes. Logged. Preservation covers it. Do not engage. The words felt like a quiet command. I shut my eyes and let the breath I'd been holding slip out slowly. No confrontation, I reminded myself. Observation only. That evening I called Dad. He sounded tired but happy to hear my voice. He said Vivian was making dinner, something with roasted chicken and herbs. I asked if he'd seen any new documents lately. He hesitated. Vivian showed me some updated lists, he said. Just so I know where everything stands. Nothing serious. I kept my tone gentle. Did you sign anything? He laughed softly. No, nothing to sign. Just talking. She said Chloe would help organize things for tax season. I smiled into the phone even though he couldn't see it. That's good, Dad. Make sure you rest. We'll go through it all together later. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a while, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the room. I opened my notebook and wrote, Schedule A revised after hold. Sender Vivian. Creator Chloe. Items Lake House 2 accounts. Logged under preservation. Contact Alan for next steps. Later that night, I received a second email, this time from a name I didn't recognize. It was brief. Legal hold acknowledged and preserved. Non-customer activity freeze confirmed. The message was signed by someone named L. Carter, Senior Compliance Officer. I forwarded it to Alan, then to my secure archive. Every confirmation felt like another brick in a wall I was quietly building. Around 10, Vivian called. Her voice was smooth, casual. I hope you're not overworking yourself. I heard you've been in touch with Alan. I said, just following up on the review. He's very thorough. She laughed softly, a sound that almost covered the edge underneath. That's good. I like people who keep things tidy. It makes transitions easier. The word transitions echoed too long in my head. I said, agreed. I'm glad we all want things clear. After we hung up, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window. Outside, the snow had stopped. The streetlight glowed against the frost, casting a soft halo over the driveway below. I thought about Vivian's voice, the practiced ease of it, how she'd learned to sound harmless while moving things behind the scenes. But this time, every movement left a trace. Every email, every change, every access log was preserved. I sat back at the table, pulled up my notes, and began writing a summary for the day. Legal hold number 2749 confirmed. Preservation acknowledged. Schedule A revised under hold. Metadata captured. Dad unaware. Vivian's tone suggestive of control. Chloe likely assisting. When I finished, I turned off the computer and stared at the empty page of my notebook. The stillness of the apartment pressed in, a kind of silence that was neither peace nor fear, just waiting. Somewhere inside that stillness, something unexpected began to take shape. Not just defense, but strategy. If they were rewriting documents in the dark, I'd make sure the light caught every line. The next morning, I woke early and checked my inbox. A new message from Alan waited at the top. His subject line was simple: good progress. Then he added one more line. Vivian called the office. Tone softened, claims confusion about revisions. That's usually a sign of recognition. I smiled faintly as I read it. Recognition meant the pattern was visible now, even to her. I closed the laptop, letting the thought settle. Proof didn't always shout. Sometimes it just waited quietly until it was undeniable. And now, with every record preserved and every move documented, the quiet was starting to work in my favor. I looked out the window at the frozen street below. The light was soft, and for the first time in weeks, I felt steady. The next step wasn't confrontation, it was consolidation. I whispered to the empty room, time is on my side. Then I turned away from the window and began preparing the next set of notes. I did not raise my voice, I raised standards. That was what I told myself when I stepped into the conference room that morning, the air faint with the smell of toner and fresh coffee. The blinds were half open, letting the weak winter light fall in long gray stripes across the table. Dad was already seated, his cane propped beside him, a plaid scarf draped over the chair. Vivian sat to his right, neatly pressed hair smooth, expression pleasant but alert. Chloe scrolled through her phone, pretending to be busy. Alan stood at the head of the table, his calm presence anchoring the space. Next to him, Laura Green, the CPA, stacked her folders with quiet efficiency. I took the chair across from Dad and opened my notebook. The title at the top of the first page read, Family Review Rules in Ink. My hands were steady, my voice felt calm. Alan started the meeting with a tone that was polite but firm. Today's purpose, he said, is to clarify expectations and formalize process controls for any future estate adjustments. No decisions, no signatures, just structure. Vivian nodded, her smile still warm but measured. That sounds responsible, she said. Chloe glanced at her, unsure whether to smile or frown, then settled on a neutral expression. Laura handed out a short packet labeled Tax Impact Summary. She spoke softly but with precision. Based on recent drafts, any accelerated asset transfers could increase exposure. The phrase increased exposure caught Vivian's attention immediately. How much exposure are we talking? She asked. Laura adjusted her glasses. Hard to say without timing, but certain transfers, like the lake property or the investment accounts, could trigger reassessment. She tapped the page gently. And without CPA certification, it could flag as non-compliant. Dad shifted in his seat, looking confused. Non-compliant sounds bad, he said. Alan smiled reassuringly. It just means we take care to do things properly, Robert. The goal is clarity and protection. Chloe leaned forward, her voice soft. We just want what's fair, Dad. That's all. I turned to her and met her eyes. Fair and documented, right? Her mouth twitched, the smile fading for a heartbeat before returning. Of course, she said. Alan continued walking them through what he called rules of change. Each point was simple and direct. No modifications without full meeting minutes. All witnesses to be disinterested third parties. All revisions require written acknowledgement from every stakeholder. No signing outside attorney supervision. Vivian took notes, but her pen barely touched the paper. When Alan paused, I spoke for the first time. I think we should include capacity verification as a routine step, just to make sure Dad feels comfortable and no one questions anything later. Laura nodded. It's best practice. Courts look favorably on self-proving affidavits. Alan agreed, making a note. We can incorporate a mini-evaluation before any future execution. Vivian smiled, tilting her head slightly. Isn't that a bit formal? Dad's perfectly capable. Her tone was smooth, but her eyes had a hint of irritation. I kept my voice even. Formality protects him, not questions him. She didn't answer. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. This is starting to sound complicated again. I leaned forward gently. You always said good fences make good neighbors. Remember, this is just a fence for the paperwork. He chuckled quietly. That's fair, let's fence it up then. Alan smiled, writing that down as the first item of acknowledgement. Laura went on to explain tax scenarios, percentages, and timelines. She used simple words, never condescending, just careful. Chloe kept glancing at her phone under the table, and once, Vivian touched her wrist lightly, a signal to stop. When Laura finished, Alan summarized everything aloud. The rules of change will be attached to the minutes, signed by all present as acknowledgement of receipt. They are not binding directives, but they establish standard procedure. Vivian nodded slowly, her lips pressed together. Fine, she said. Structure helps. Chloe scribbled something in her planner, probably a note to adjust strategy later. I ignored it. Alan looked to me. Anything to add, Emma? I shook my head. I think that covers it. Denise, the paralegal, entered then with a notary seal and the attendance sheet. She recorded the participants' time in and out and placed the documents in a folder labeled Family Governance Memo. Each of us signed the acknowledgement line. Dad's signature wobbled slightly, but was legible. Vivian's was neat sharp. Chloe's looked rushed. When the pen came to me, I signed slowly, pressing each letter clearly. The sound of the pen scratching against paper felt like closure. After the signatures, Laura reviewed the compliance logs she had pulled from the bank. She spoke carefully, each word measured. There were 2 recent vault visits on record this week, she said. One logged under Chloe's name, one under a different access badge. She slid a printed report across the table. Vivian's face stayed neutral, but I saw her hand tighten on the edge of her chair. Chloe blinked quickly, feigning confusion. That must have been when I went with Dad, she said. Laura shook her head. The timestamps showed 2 separate entries, both within 2 days. One late evening. Alan's eyes met mine briefly. He didn't say anything, but the weight of the information filled the room. Vivian smoothed the front of her coat. I'm sure there's an explanation, she said too lightly. Dad frowned. What's the vault got to do with anything? Laura's tone softened. Just ensuring nothing's moved prematurely. It's standard when reviewing estate structures. Alan closed his folder. That concludes the agenda for today. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. The formality broke the tension, but not the awareness. Vivian stood too quickly, her chair scraping slightly against the floor. She gathered her bag, her movements sharp. Chloe muttered something about an appointment and followed her out. Dad lingered, looking at the table. You think I'm losing control of this, don't you? He asked quietly. I took his hand gently. Not at all, Dad. You're just making sure things are done right. He nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging. I never wanted it to be a fight. I smiled softly. Then we won't make it one. When he left with Alan, I stayed behind for a moment, watching the light fade through the blinds. The smell of coffee had cooled, turning slightly bitter. I picked up the acknowledgement sheet and looked at the 4 signatures lined up across the page. For the first time, everything was in writing. No assumptions, no hidden edits, no verbal traps. Back in my car, I sat in silence, letting the heater thaw the chill from my hands. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. Compliance record update, vault visits verified and under investigation. 2 entries confirmed. The subject line glowed in the dim light of the dashboard. I saved it instantly, renamed it in my archive as Record 7A. Outside, the snow had started again, fine and steady. I watched the flakes settle on the windshield until the glass blurred. The meeting was over, but the pattern was still shifting. Rules had been written, but now they needed to be tested. Somewhere beneath the silence of all these polite exchanges, something was about to surface. I closed my eyes, letting the quiet sink in. Tomorrow I will find out who the second visitor was. 2 visits. One was my sister. The other was not random. That thought kept echoing in my mind as I drove through the morning fog toward the bank's downtown branch. The air was heavy with cold, and the streets still glistened from the night's frost. I parked under the skeletal trees lining the sidewalk and sat for a moment, staring at the reflection of my own face in the windshield. I looked calm, composed. But inside, everything was running like a quiet current beneath ice. Alan's email still sat open on my phone, confirming 2 separate vault entries, one under Chloe's badge and another under an unknown ID tagged as visitor, access. Today I would find out who that visitor was. Janet met me at the side door, her coat collar turned up against the wind. She led me through a short hallway that smelled faintly of ink and metal, Polish. Her office lights were already on papers stacked neatly on the desk. She gestured for me to sit. The legal hold is still active, she said, handing me a printed log. The 2 visits you asked about are flagged. One on Tuesday at 3:42 verified as Chloe Reed. The second Thursday at 6:08 in the evening, access granted through temporary authorization. No customer listed. I traced the printed lines with my finger, the way I used to when reviewing compliance reports at work. Who signed for the temporary pass? Janet hesitated. It was a mobile notary, she said finally. Name is Helen Cross. She's been used before by your stepmother. I felt my pulse slow, heavy, and deliberate. Did she enter alone? No. Video shows her accompanied by Chloe. Both logged in, but Helen handled the paperwork. I nodded once, careful to keep my voice even. Can you preserve the footage under the current legal hold? She smiled faintly. Already done. I sat back, staring at the fluorescent light humming above us. I remembered Vivian's words at the brunch, that smooth promise of simplicity. I thought of Chloe's confidence at the last meeting, her easy smile when she signed the acknowledgement. All of it choreographed, each move a step closer to control. But they had made a mistake. They had left a trail that was no longer theirs to edit. Janet looked at me thoughtfully. "Do you want me to escalate this internally?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Just keep the records sealed." She nodded, understanding. Before I left, she handed me a printed copy of the stills from the security footage. The images were grainy but clear enough. Chloe and Helen both standing near the vault, their faces half turned toward the camera. Chloe's expression was tight and patient. Helen's was nervous, her lips pressed into a thin line. Outside, the sky had brightened to a flat gray. I called Alan from the parking lot, my breath visible in the air. He answered on the second ring. I told him what I had found, the names, the timestamp, the video. His voice stayed calm but carried weight. "That confirms external involvement. We can initiate a standstill letter immediately. It will freeze any ongoing document activity tied to the estate." I exhaled slowly. "Do it." By noon, the letter was sent. It was short, formal, and final. The first line read, "This notice confirms a procedural standstill on all pending estate or financial document revisions until verification of capacity and authorization." The language was airtight, leaving no room for interpretation. Alan copied me and the bank's compliance office on the thread. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A message from Vivian. "Just saw the letter. Is this really necessary?" I didn't answer. Another message followed. "We're all on the same side here." I still didn't reply. Silence was a kind of power she didn't understand. That evening I visited Dad. The lake house sat quiet under a thin veil of snow, the porch light flickering in the wind. He opened the door in his sweater and smiled faintly. "Didn't expect you tonight." I held up a paper bag. "Brought dinner." He led me inside, the smell of cedar and winter air filling the hallway. Vivian was out at a meeting, she'd said. The house felt calmer without her voice echoing through it. We sat by the fire after eating, the warmth soft against the silence. I asked him how he felt about everything lately. He rubbed his hands together, staring into the flames. "Sometimes I feel like people are making decisions for me. They say it's to help, but I get lost in the details." I nodded, keeping my tone gentle. "Do you want me to slow things down for you, Dad?" His eyes met mine, and for a moment he looked like the man I remembered, strong, steady. "Yes," he said quietly. "Slow it down." Before I left, he handed me a small key from his pocket. "Keep this for now," he said. I asked what it was. He smiled. "The extra key to the safe in my study. I've been meaning to clean it out anyway." The next morning, I stopped by Alan's office again. He was reviewing the standstill acknowledgement from the bank. He looked up when I entered. The letter worked. "All activity is paused," he said. "Chloe called earlier asking about next steps, but I advised her nothing moves until the investigation closes." I sat down, feeling the quiet satisfaction of progress. "What about Helen Cross?" He sighed. "She's technically independent. We can issue a witness inquiry through counsel. If she cooperates, we get a statement." Later that day, the bank confirmed that the vault access was now blocked under the preservation hold. Anyone attempting to enter would trigger a compliance alert. The system would flag the attempt, record it, and notify the legal department automatically. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the image of Chloe and Helen standing by the vault door, their faces frozen in the still frame. I imagined the sound of the metal lock turning, the faint echo of paperwork shuffling, the quiet panic of realizing someone had seen. The image wasn't revenge. It was clear. At 3 a.m, I made tea and sat by the window. The street below was empty, the snow glinting under the streetlight. I thought about all the quiet battles fought in families, the ones that never made it into stories. The ones fought not with shouting but with records, dates, and signatures. By dawn, an email from Alan arrived. "Standstill acknowledged by all parties. Compliance confirmed, hold integrity." I forwarded it to my archive folder and added a new note to my journal. 2 visits, one with my sister, one with Vivian's notary, both under hold. "Standstill effective, chain of custody secure." That afternoon, a message arrived from an unknown address. Just 5 words. "Check your dad's study drawer." My chest tightened. It was the same number that had sent the tip about the vault. I stared at the screen, the words glowing like a whisper I could almost hear. When evening came, I drove to the lake house. The air was brittle, the sky deep blue fading into black. Inside the house was quiet. Dad was asleep in his chair, the TV murmuring low. I moved softly through the hallway to his study. The key fit easily in the drawer lock. Inside were stacks of envelopes, some yellowed with age. One of them caught my eye, labeled in my dad's handwriting, "Will Revisions 2018. Underneath it, a smaller envelope sealed with a notary stamp. My name was written on the front. I haven't opened it yet. I just held it, feeling the weight of paper that might finally tell the truth. Behind me, the fire crackled faintly, the sound soft and steady. I knew the next step would change everything, but for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. I closed the drawer gently and slipped the envelope into my bag. On my way out, I glanced at Dad sleeping. The lines on his face softened in the glow of the TV. He looked peaceful, like the world outside couldn't touch him anymore. I whispered a promise in the quiet room. I'll protect this and I'll protect you. Outside, the snow had started again, thin flakes drifting like dust. I stood on the porch for a moment, the cold air biting at my skin, and watched the white settle over the frozen lake. Somewhere behind me in that study drawer, the truth had been waiting for years. The folder was older than I expected, the edges soft from years of being opened and closed. I wore cotton gloves, the kind used for archiving, though my hands still shook a little as I lifted the first page. The study was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock and the sound of snow melting from the eaves outside. The air smelled like cedar and paper. The manila envelope held several letters, all written in my dad's unmistakable handwriting, each dated carefully in the top right corner. The earliest was from 5 years ago, the most recent from last spring. My name appeared on every one of them. I sat down at his desk, the same one he'd used for decades, and began to read. He had written plainly without legal phrasing or pretense. The first line of the oldest letter read, "My intention has always been that everything be divided evenly. The house, the accounts, and whatever remains after debts." He mentioned Vivian with kindness, saying she should have comfort but not burden. Each page carried that same tone, clarity, fairness, love wrapped in practicality. My chest tightened as I read the last line of the final letter. "If I'm not around to explain it, I trust Emma to make sure this stays right." The words blurred slightly before I blinked them back into focus. I took a deep breath and began cataloging what I saw, photographing each page with my phone. The light from the desk lamp made the ink glow faintly blue. I checked the timestamps, ensuring each photo carried the correct metadata. Then I opened a new note on my laptop and typed "Original letters discovered. Study drawer, January 13th, 8:42 p.m." Signed in Dad's handwriting. Language confirms equal division and capacity intent. The second folder underneath contained a report from a clinic, dated just 2 months ago. I recognized the letterhead from the cognitive evaluation Alan had arranged, with Dad's consent. It stated clearly that he possessed full decision-making capacity when given adequate time and support, though noted mild vulnerability to external pressure. The phrase was underlined twice. I folded the report neatly and added it to the growing stack beside the letters. Dad's footsteps creaked softly in the hallway. He appeared in the doorway wearing his flannel robe, rubbing the back of his neck. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Too many things on my mind." I closed the folder halfway, meeting his eyes. "I found your letters, Dad." He looked at the desk, then nodded slowly. "I wrote those a long time ago when I started to feel the pressure. I wanted it on paper. I didn't want anyone thinking I didn't know what I was doing." His voice cracked slightly. "You were always the steady one." I stood and hugged him gently, feeling the frailty of his frame. "You did the right thing," I said. "These are clear. They'll protect you." He nodded, his eyes wet. "I never meant for it to become a battle." "I know, Dad. I'll make sure it ends right." After he went back to bed, I sat down again and continued documenting. I scanned each page with my phone's document app, saving the files to my encrypted folder. Then I ran a checksum on the scans, creating a hash to verify authenticity. I sealed the originals in a new envelope and labeled it Chain of Custody A. On the back, I signed my initials, date, and time. At midnight, I texted Alan a single line, "Found original letters and clinic evaluation. Chain established." He replied within a few minutes. "Keep originals sealed. Bring copies tomorrow. We'll authenticate through witness verification." The next morning, the world looked washed clean after the storm. I drove to the office with the envelope in my bag, the heat from the car slowly warming my fingers. The radio played softly an old song about home and forgiveness. When I arrived, Alan was already waiting with Laura and a paralegal witness. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper again, like all the other mornings of this strange battle. I handed him the sealed envelope. He inspected the seal, noted the timestamp, and signed his name across the flap. Then he opened it carefully, pulling out the letters one by one. The room fell silent as he read. When he finished, he looked up at me. "This confirms long-term intent." His voice carried quiet satisfaction. He turned to Laura. "We'll attach these as Exhibit A in the minutes." Laura nodded, noting the details in her ledger. Vivian arrived unannounced just after 10. She entered with her usual perfume and polished calm, but her smile wavered when she saw the papers on the table. "I was just dropping by to bring Robert his medication," she said, though her eyes flicked toward the folder. Alan gestured for her to sit. "Perfect timing," he said. "We were just reviewing confirmation of Robert's prior intent." Vivian froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "That's good. I'm glad everything's being reviewed. Alan handed her a copy of the summary page showing the even split, the comfort clause, and the 5-year term for the lake house. Her eyes scanned quickly. She lingered on the word even. That wasn't how we last discussed it, she murmured. Alan's tone stayed calm. This predates all recent drafts and will serve as the definitive reference for the restatement. Vivian nodded slowly, folding her hands. If that's what Robert wanted, that's what matters. Chloe arrived 10 minutes later, tension radiating from her like static. She didn't sit. She just crossed her arms and said, "Are we redoing everything again?" Alan smiled politely. "We're clarifying everything, Chloe. That's how law works." She huffed her eyes, darting toward me. "You just can't leave it alone, can you?" I met her gaze steadily. "I'm just making sure Dad's voice is the one that gets heard." Laura cleared her throat softly. "Let's keep it professional, please." Chloe dropped into the chair, exhaling sharply. The rest of the review passed in near silence. When Alan finished reading the summary aloud, he asked each of us to initial a line confirming we had reviewed it. Vivian hesitated but signed. Chloe pressed the pen harder than necessary, leaving a small tear in the paper. I signed last steady and clear. After the meeting, Alan turned to me. "We'll prepare the final restatement for execution tomorrow morning. I'll have the notary and witnesses ready. The clinic report will serve as confirmation of capacity, and these letters will remain sealed until recording." I nodded, feeling the first real wave of relief in months. That afternoon, I visited Dad again. The sky was overcast, the kind that made the lake look like steel. He was sitting by the window, a blanket over his knees, a cup of tea on the table beside him. "Did you get it sorted?" he asked. I smiled. "Almost. One more step tomorrow." He looked at me for the long time, then nodded. "I trust you, Em. You've got your mother's patience." I sat beside him for a while, listening to the wind against the glass. He talked about the old summers at the lake, about Mom teaching Chloe to swim while he built the dock. There was a softness in his voice I hadn't heard in years. When he finally dozed off, I looked around the room, taking in the familiar pictures, the sound of the clock, the faint smell of the cedar walls. It felt like home again, not a battlefield. That night back in my apartment, I opened my laptop to organize the final files. The scans, the photos, the clinic report, the legal minutes, every piece had a place. As I was closing the folders, a new email preview flickered across the screen. It was from Vivian's address, time-stamped 2 minutes earlier. The subject read beneficiary draft. For a moment, my stomach dropped. But when I opened it, the document loaded blank, just empty fields with no entries. The metadata showed a revision attempt, overwritten and saved to 0 kilobytes. I stared at the screen, a slow, steady calm washing over me. I took a screenshot, time-stamped it, and saved it to my final log. Then I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the heater filling the silence. Tomorrow would bring the clean signing. And for the first time, I believed it might actually hold. The pen felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of every word that had ever been signed in this family. The conference room smelled faintly of coffee and ink, the air still with the kind of quiet that means no one dares to speak first. The neutral notary sat at the far end of the table, a woman in her 60s with soft gray hair and a gaze that saw everything. 2 disinterested witnesses waited beside her, pens poised, eyes patient. The documents lay in the center, perfectly aligned. Each page was blank, fresh from the printer, ready to become what my dad had intended years ago before the noise began. I looked across the table at Chloe, whose confidence had finally started to fade. Vivian sat beside her, expression unreadable, the faintest tremor in her clasped hands. Dad sat at the head of the table, his face pale but calm. His reading glasses rested halfway down his nose as he glanced at the first page. Alan stood to his right, explaining every paragraph slowly, carefully, his voice steady. Each word carried the weight of weeks spent collecting, preserving, waiting. Laura, the CPA, took notes at the corner of the table, occasionally glancing up to confirm the numbers. I could hear the soft hum of the fluorescent light overhead and the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second carving its place in time. Alan read the title of the document aloud, Restatement of the Robert Reed Family Trust. He paused to let the words settle. Dad nodded. His voice, though faint, carried clarity. "Let's make sure this one's the last." Vivian's smile was small but brittle. "Of course, dear." Chloe said nothing, her jaw-tight eyes on the table. The notary cleared her throat gently. "Reed, I'll confirm your awareness before we begin. You understand the nature and purpose of these documents?" Dad nodded again. "Yes, they reflect what I want, not what anyone else does." I felt a quiet shiver of pride at that. Alan turned the pages, slowly reviewing each section. The will, the trust restatement, the letter of intent. Everything matched the originals found in Dad's handwriting. Every distribution, every clause reflected the balance he'd always intended. Vivian would have the right to live at the lake house for 5 years after his passing, with maintenance costs covered by the trust. After that, the property would revert to equal ownership between Chloe and me. The accounts were split evenly, no joint or transfer on death shortcuts. No hidden clauses, no tricks. When Dad signed, the notary placed her seal with quiet ceremony. The sound of the stamp pressing against paper was sharp and final. The witnesses followed one after the other, their names looping neatly in blue ink. I signed last beside the acknowledgement line, my hand steady. Halfway through, Alan stopped reading. His brows furrowed as he pulled a separate folder from his briefcase. This, he said, was submitted last week under Vivian's signature but without authorization. He opened it, revealing a form half completed, familiar in layout but different in tone. The same pre-filled beneficiary attempt that had been intercepted weeks ago. The same handwriting. Chloe inhaled sharply. Vivian's eyes darted to her. Alan handed it to the notary. Please append this to today's minutes as evidence of prior interference. The notary nodded and placed it in a clear envelope, sealing it with tape. Dad looked confused for a moment, then weary. Was that recent? Alan's tone was careful. It was. But it will have no effect now. Everything signed today supersedes prior drafts. Dad nodded, leaning back in his chair. Then let's keep it clean this time. Vivian's voice was soft when she spoke. I was just trying to make things easier for everyone. Chloe's head turned toward her, the first sign of emotion cracking through her composure. Easier for who, Mom? Vivian's eyes flickered, unsure how to answer. For all of us, she said finally, though her voice trembled. Laura closed her ledger, her tone gentle but firm. Transparency always makes things easier. Vivian didn't respond. Chloe looked down at her hands, twisting the ring on her finger until it left a faint red mark. When it was over, Alan gathered the signed copies, stacked them neatly, and handed the originals to the notary for verification. The documents would be filed the same day, recorded with both the court and the trust administrator. Every signature, every witness, every timestamp would be preserved under record retention. There would be no gaps, no chance for revision. Dad smiled faintly, exhaustion softening his features. I think I can finally rest easy now, he said. You can, I told him. His hand found mine on the table, the same warm, steady grasp I remembered from when I was little. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded, as if something unspoken had been understood. After the meeting, we walked him out to the car. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of rain. Vivian wrapped her coat tightly, avoiding my eyes. Chloe lingered by the steps, staring at her phone like she wanted to disappear into it. When Dad was settled inside, I turned to Alan. Thank you, I said quietly. He smiled. You did the hard part. You kept calm. Not everyone can do that when the people they love start acting like clients. I smiled back faintly. Proof lasts longer than anger, right? He nodded. Every time. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine, the signed copies laid out on the table under the lamplight. The ink shimmered slightly and the light still fresh. I took a photo of each page, saved them to my encrypted folder, and labeled the archive Clean Signing January 14th. Then I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, letting the silence fill the room. The snow outside had turned to rain, tapping softly against the window. I thought of everything that had led to this day, the dinner, the memo, the vault, the whispers, the lies folded neatly between polite smiles. It was all over now. No one would ever be able to twist Dad's intentions again. The proof was sealed, witnessed, filed. Justice quiet and complete, written in ink instead of rage. Later, Dad called just to say thank you. His voice was tired but peaceful. I told him to rest, that everything was handled. When we hung up, I sat there for a while, staring at the city lights through the rain. I realized I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was balance. The world hadn't been fixed, but something small inside me had been restored. Before bed, I opened my journal to the last page. Under the date, I wrote, Clean signing complete. Vivian acknowledged fair terms. Chloe is silent. Proof secured. Then I added one more line. Peace does not come from confrontation. It comes from clarity. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. The quiet felt different now. Not like waiting, more like a steady heartbeat. For the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of signatures or locks or whispers behind doors. The next morning, I woke early, sunlight spilling through the blinds. The air smelled like the start of something ordinary, like coffee and fresh paper. I made breakfast and sat by the window watching the street come alive below. Somewhere out there, life kept moving, unaware of the small wars fought and won in silence. I thought of Dad's words, the way he said, it's good to keep things clean. He was right. Clean didn't mean cold, it meant honesty. It meant boundaries built on something stronger than fear. I looked down at the table where the documents still sat in their folder, the notary seal glinting faintly under the light. My reflection flickered on the glossy surface, calm and whole. I whispered to myself, that's enough. If you've ever had to protect someone you love from being taken advantage of, you know this feeling. The quiet after the storm, when the proof speaks louder than the pain ever did. I learned that silence isn't a weakness. Its strength is measured in patience, in every record kept, every boundary held. If you've been through something like this, tell me how you found your peace. Leave a comment below. Like and subscribe for more stories of quiet justice, where proof speaks louder than revenge and silence becomes power.